In this presentation, you are going to learn about the basics of photography composition, the harmony of art, composition, and design. Photography is an incredibly accessible art form. Do you know anyone who doesn't have a camera these days? Most people do. But unfortunately, most people don't take good images. To begin, let's look at two images. Think about what makes these images effective. Perhaps it's a unique angle, or a subject matter out of place. Maybe lines, shapes, and textures, or a spot of color against white. In this presentation, you're going to be introduced to some of the elements of basic composition, including mood and atmosphere, qualities of a good photo, basic composition, and improving composition. Mood is the overall feel of a picture. It's created by perspective, color, focus, isolation and distance, weather and light, sunrise, sunset, misty, rainy days, and sun versus overcast days. Characteristics of a good photo include a combination of design elements, working with mood. The design elements include shape, line, pattern, texture, and size and space. Shapes tend to be noticed first, before texture and pattern. They're the easiest and most recognizable compositional tool. Shape helps create a mood or character for the picture. Search for unconventional or surprise shapes in objects or places. Lighting is a common means for creating shape in photographs. It can be created through silhouettes, backlighting, or by shadows. When you're photographing, look for unique shapes. Explore tilt and camera angle to allow the shapes to be a dominant part of your composition. Lines create shape, pattern, depth, and perspective. Line leads the eye to the focal point or subject, and types of line include diagonals and S-curves. Line influences perspective. Strong pattern lines can flatten space, while curved lines draw the viewer back into the picture plane. Diminishing lines create depth in photographs. Lines into the horizon show depth and perspective for the viewer. Vanishing point is the point at which lines converge and vanish into the horizon. Diagonal lines are created by camera tilting and can make fun, informal compositions. If you look carefully, you can see lines everywhere. Curved lines can create S-curves that draw the viewer through the composition. Pattern is an orderly combination of shape, line, or color. Pattern can help echo the character of a photo. Patterns catch attention, especially random patterns with slight variations, or patterns in common places or even in uncommon places. Patterns appear in nature and man-made objects. Texture adds realism, a sense of touch, to a photo. Sharp and hard light, such as bright direct sun, highlights texture. Side lighting also highlights texture, and most portraits use front lighting to decrease texture on skin and smooth out skin tones. Texture can be an important element to hold interest in photographs, such as this close-up of flowers. Sometimes hard light is inappropriate for illustrating shape and depth. Soft side lighting can give a sense of shape and depth without high contrast. This can be useful in portraits, street photography, still lifes, or when shape and depth is more important than texture. Two-dimensional pictures distort depth, relative size, and distances. You can include reference items or include parts of the foreground or background, paying attention to reflections or sky, and use framing or camera positioning to be creative with space. Explore filling the frame. Looking up at objects maximizes the subject matter. Aerial perspective, looking down on subjects, minimizes subjects, making large objects seem small. Overlapping forms, overlapping objects in a picture, create depth and distance. Selective focus, focusing on the subject using wide open aperture, adds depth by blurring the foreground. Eye movement is an important part of a composition. Be aware of how objects control eye movement through the picture plane. Guide the eye movement inside the composition. Include parts of the foreground or background to control eye movement if you like. Turn the eye from moving out of the four corners. Always keep the viewer eye in your photo. And tilt the camera to control eye movement if you desire. Consider how these two photos are different. Pay attention to edge placement of focal points to keep the viewer engaged on the subject, or if you want to move them out of the subject. You can also explore the tilt. Deliberate camera tilting can be used for dramatic effects. There are many ways to improve composition, including those shown on screen. Don't worry, you won't have to learn all these at once. You're being introduced to these concepts to give you something to look forward to. The assignments in this class will help you put all of these together over the next 8 weeks. In this class, you're going to learn about the rule of thirds. This is a compositional strategy that helps you place your focal point or subject matter strategically along the grid intersections to have a strong center of interest. You'll also learn to take photos at different angles with different compositions, and also to incorporate the rule of thirds by placing the focal point along the grid intersections. Simplicity is another way to improve composition that works with the rule of thirds. With this technique, you have one strong center of interest. You place it along the intersection of the grid lines. You'll have to practice this technique to learn to apply it. The foreground or background should be simple or complementary to the center of interest. You can choose to include foreground or background for sense of isolation, distance, or depth. Use in-camera cropping to frame and focus on subject matter. Close-up focus also works to simplify compositions. Avoid cutting out parts or holes of people or main subjects. And avoid cutting out the path of a moving object. Give the object somewhere to go. Pay attention to your camera angle. Low angles, such as worm's eye view, make things seem dramatic. It can also accentuate movement or action. High angles can help eliminate cloudy sky. And if you hold your camera at a 45-degree angle, you can cut the glare when shooting into the sun. Explore bird's eye view, even for close-ups, to dramatically change compositions. Framing is another technique that adds depth and helps the subject fill the frame. It can also be used to block unwanted subjects from view. When you use autofocus, be sure to center the focus on the subject and then reposition the camera if you need. You can also explore light and shadow for framing. Also, explore filling the frame when taking a portrait. Balance color and weight in a picture. Your balance can be formal and informal, or symmetrical and asymmetrical. Symmetrical balance is when items are similar to each other if the image is folded in half. Some things don't have to be exact for symmetry, as approximate symmetry is still predominantly symmetrical. Asymmetry is when items are not equally weighted visually on both sides.